And all right. Yeah, those bolsters, they're optional. It's just sometimes it's more comfortable. If you have your feet up on those, it's yeah, keeps your feet warmer on the floor. But well, welcome everybody. We'll just take a minute to do our purification ritual, which is simply checking in with whatever it is that is the predominant state of mind. I can tell you for myself, for example, I've had a real busy couple of days with a lot of things that I'm scheduling and trying to kind of get lined up on a schedule. So there's sort of a bit of a feeling of kind of anxiousness and trying to meet deadlines that comes up as a result of that. And then I'll find that when I sit down to meditate, some of that stuff starts to come up. You know, the thoughts will come into the mind about, oh, I need to remember to do this, and I need to remember to do that. So these are some of the things that I'm talking about when we talk about purification. It's not trying to get rid of, sinful thoughts or something like that. It's really just checking in with, is there anything here that's in the way? Is there any excess baggage that I can put down for now? And then what I invariably discover in myself is that when I put down these thoughts, the stressfulness or the worriness, and I work on my meditation practice, then I can go back to those things and pick them up again, metaphorically, and start to work on them, and I'll feel more refreshed. I'll feel like I have a more wisdom-based outlook on what is going on. And so this can be a very helpful part of the practice. It's just an objective kind of taking inventory and then putting down what is not absolutely necessary at this time. So I just invite you to all share in that experience with me, thinking of anything that is a hindrance or might be in the way of your practice tonight. Putting that down in a very skillful, very compassionate and loving way, knowing you can pick it up again. And so with that, I'll sound this temple bell for purification. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. And with that very simple practice, there is peace. So, welcome again, everybody. We'll move into our meditation practice. So why don't you take a minute to get comfy for that, however you would like to be. I've got these cushions configured on the floor in sort of the traditional way, but you can use them differently. You can, lay on them if you want to, or whatever's comfortable for you. So anything that feels right. And there are extra blankets in the closet if anybody feels chilly. Turn the heat up to 70 in this room just before folks came, so hopefully it'll be a good, comfortable temperature for us. So a few basics to review before we go into our meditation. However you're sitting or laying when we start, it doesn't mean you have to stay that way for the whole practice. If you start to feel discomfort anywhere in the body, you feel like you need to shift or move, feel free to do that. There are some advantages to holding still while we meditate, but you need to be able to be comfortable in your body. So if you need to move. That is not a problem. And then having said that, we check in with the body and look for a degree of symmetry. Sometimes it's a real habit for many of us. We kind of just put all our weight on one side or the other. We put our weight on left hip or right hip. And so that'll lead to muscle strain over a period of time. So We try to get the body so it's in symmetry, doing the same thing on both sides, supporting us equally. And then as we're doing that, we can become aware of the spine and its position. I use different ways of describing, kind of different images of describing the spine. But one that might be helpful to you is if you imagine that your spine, as it comes all the way up into your skull, the back of your skull, then you have a string attached to your spine at that point, and that string is being gently raised. And so what that does is lifts your back effortlessly, straightens the back, lifts it, and you're able to sit with a balanced spine. And then you can tilt your head, your chin forward ever so slightly to take pressure off the back of the neck. Okay, and then we'll close our eyes to eliminate any visual distractions. Makes it easier to practice. And then we'll just let the breath be natural. It will come and go as it pleases. And later on we'll be observing the breath, so if you're able to breathe through your nose, that's helpful. But otherwise, just breathe in whatever way is comfortable for you, however you need to breathe. So with all of that said, I am going to ring the bell and begin the meditation. So just follow the sound of the bell into silence. And that silence becomes a very warm, welcome invitation to turn our senses inward. Sometimes in the beginning of our meditation experiences as people, we shy away from that idea of turning the senses inward because we're not used to it. But what we discover after a little bit of practice is that to turn our senses inward is to come upon that part of us that is stable, that is dependable and reliable, that we have access to this very strong, very wonderful, peaceful place within ourselves. And so with each meditation practice, we work to cultivate that space. We work to make it stronger, healthier, more inviting, filled with wisdom. So turning the senses inward is a wonderful thing. And we do begin to feel that sense of this is home. This is a good and safe place to be. So with our awareness established here in the body, in the present moment, focused on the feeling of being present, sitting or laying here, let's all bring our awareness now up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. And then for a few moments, we'll just observe sensations as they come and go in the scalp. Anything we notice as those sensations come and go. So sometimes it just takes a little patience, a little time. And then you might start to notice something in the scalp. Sometimes there's a temperature awareness. You'll feel cool or warm. Sometimes there's a little bit of air movement in the room. You might detect that in the scalp. Otherwise, there are common sensations like tickles or itches or just a pulsation. So we're opening up our awareness to any of these sensations in the scalp. And we're also not worried about, oh, I need to feel this or I shouldn't feel that. We're just opening up to whatever the experience is without judging it negatively, just letting it come letting it pass away. And then as we are spending time in the scalp, observing it, if you become aware of any tension anywhere in the scalp, which there very often is, just go ahead and release that tension. Allow it to leave the body unconditionally. And you don't need to drive the tension out or try and push it away with any sort of anger or negativity. Just upon noticing tension, just offer it with great compassion, unconditioned passage out of the body, and just let it go. And then after the tension leaves, you might notice a feeling of greater peacefulness in the body, sometimes a little feeling of joyfulness as that tension passes away. So now from the scalp, we'll move our awareness downward into the forehead. We'll also let it move into the temples, then downward a bit, passing through the eyebrows and moving into the eyes. And now in the same way, we'll just spend time here and open up awareness to any of the physical sensations. So we just observe. And we're not reacting in any other way than to just objectively observe them. Temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. And we watch as those arise and pass away. And sometimes we'll notice the tension that is being held in the body in some of these parts. Very common to have the brow furrowed, or maybe your eyes are squinting a little bit, or there's tightness in the temples. So we come upon that tension and we smile and offer it unconditional release from the body. And just let it go. And we feel more stable and at ease. And then from the temples, we can start to guide the awareness downward into the ears. We'll feel it moving through the ears. And now I'll start to name a few parts of the body, just one after another. And so you can just bring your awareness, attentive awareness to those parts, awareness of sensation. And then at the same time, you can release any tension that you're discovering. So from the ears now, we move our awareness forward into the face. We feel it passing through the cheekbones, moving through the face, and then from the eyes, we feel that awareness drifting slowly down through the nose, and then through the lips and mouth and chin. Just observing everything with objective awareness, and then taking a look around for tension wherever that might be. And for many of us, we'll find that there's tension in the jaws, the teeth are clenched. We let that go. We discover that the lips are pursed and there's tension there, so we let that go. And sometimes there's tension in other parts of the face as well, so we're releasing that and just being aware of the feeling of resting comfortably in the body without tension in these areas. And now from the chin, we can guide the awareness downward into the neck, into the front of the neck and the throat. And see if you can really feel that flow of awareness. Sometimes it is obvious and noticeable. So we try to cultivate that awareness of the flow of awareness moving through the body. Observing the throat and the sides of the neck and the back of the neck. Letting that tension go. And then the awareness drops down into the shoulders, all the way across the shoulders. And here you might observe sensations like contact. If you're leaning against a chair, you might feel that contact or that bearing of your body weight. If you're laying on the floor, you'd feel that as well. Also, you might notice that the shoulders are tense. We often shrug them a little bit so you can let them drop and relax fully. And then from the shoulders, we'll move our awareness into the upper arms. And just spend a little time there observing. For a few seconds, let's observe the biceps. Whatever sensation is there. And if there's tension in the biceps, just let that go. Sometimes we'll move into parts of the body where we don't really notice any tension. We look and we think, no tension here. What you can try is releasing the tension anyway in each area. And sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised at the amount of relaxation that comes from releasing tension that you didn't even think was there. So moving from the biceps to the inside surface of the upper arms, and then rotating around to the back part of the upper arms, and finally to the outer surface. Moving from the shoulders all the way down to the elbow joints. And then once you're in the elbow joints, just feel that awareness moving through in a soothing way, moving down through the forearms. You just kind of feel it flowing down towards the wrists. And then with awareness in the wrists, we can move it into the hands, the palms and the heels of the hands. And sometimes we might notice there's perspiration here in these parts. And then we can rotate the awareness around to the top surface of the hands. Perhaps the sensations are different. We release the tension. And we move the awareness into the thumbs and the fingers of the hands. And finally, we bring it all the way down to the fingertips and the fingernails. So this is an interesting challenge to just bring your attentive awareness to this part of your body, the fingernails, and just see if any sensations come up. You might not even have a word or a name to describe those sensations, but the experience is there. So just let yourself live that experience. Let go of tension. Moving all the way through the feet. All the way through the hands, the fingernails. And then from the fingernails, we'll make a move. This time we'll go to the chest, the top of the chest, the collarbones. Let the awareness kind of spread across the collarbones, and then we'll feel it as it moves downward slowly through the chest, just passing through the tissue and the muscles, all the way down to the base of the sternum. And then with awareness in the sternum, we spread it out through the rib cage. And then from the rib cage, we can bring the awareness upward to the underarms and focus here for a few moments. To the sensations you feel. Sometimes there's kind of a feeling of bunched up fabric there in the underarms from our shirts. Sometimes there's a little feeling of perspiration. So we're not judging, just observing anything that's there. Letting the tension leave, letting the awareness drift down through the sides of the body to the waist. And then once we're in the waist, we move the awareness forward into the belly. So just focus all your awareness on your belly right now. Observe the rising and falling of the belly with the in-breath and the out-breath. Observe the expansion and contraction. So there are a lot of sensations in the belly, and let go of tension there. In addition to those sensations, we often hold tension there in the belly. So we let that go, let the belly feel free. And then from the belly, we will move around to the top of the back, starting at the base of the neck. And we'll begin to move awareness downward through the upper third of the back, passing through the shoulder blades, just observing, letting go, letting that awareness drift a little further downward into the middle third of the back, just observing and letting go. And then finally down to the lower third of the back, we observe and let go again. And one very common experience for us is as we're moving through the back and some other parts of the body, but often as we move through the back, we discover that there are sensations that are unpleasant. Sometimes there's discomfort or fatigue or pain. And in those cases, it can be difficult to remain objective about those sensations. It's a very personal thing to experience physical pain. And it makes it difficult for us to let go of the tension around that pain. So what we can do now, with an awareness of this expansive quality of awareness that we have, that our awareness is so much bigger than our bodies or our minds, and that we can open up this awareness and allow as much space as is needed for these difficult sensations to be just as they are. We don't need to react to them in any substantial way. We just release them, allow them to leave the body, and we find that it makes it easier for us to move our awareness through, and it makes it easier for us to let go of the tension. So it's a very healthy practice, learning to be at peace with the way things are in the body. Now we can move the awareness down into the sit bones, feel it moving through there, and moving through the hips, moving through the remainder of the pelvis, just observing and letting go. And then from the pelvis we can move the awareness downward into the thighs. And when we're in the thighs, we will spend a little time with the different parts. First, the upward facing surface of the thighs, the tops. Just observing them for a few moments. Any sensations, any tension gets released. Then rotating outward to the outside surface of the thighs. Then rotating again to the underside of the thighs, the bottoms of the thighs. And then moving to the inside surface of the thighs. And just moving from the top all the way down to the knees. And then once we're down in the knees, letting awareness flow through the knees. Feel it as it moves downward into the calves and the shins. You feel it as it continues to move down through the ankles, just observing, moving that awareness finally down into the feet, into the heels, and the soles of the feet and the balls of the feet. And then finally, the top surface of the feet and the toes, which leads us to the toenails. So here again, in this very small part of the body with very subtle sensations, we'll just spend a moment here observing, looking for any sensation in the toenails. And if you don't feel anything, that's just fine. And sometimes you will feel something, and that's good. Now what we'll do is we'll bring our awareness from the toenails, we'll bring it once again up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. But this time, at your own pace, you can move your awareness back down through your body. So what I recommend is that you can move to a part of the body, and in one in-breath, you can observe the sensations that are there. And then in one out-breath, you can release the tension that is there. So in-breath, observing, out-breath, releasing. And just staying with that. In-breath, observing, out-breath, releasing, moving the awareness back down through the body, from the head all the way down to the feet. And once you've had a chance to move your awareness through in this way, let's all bring our awareness together up to the little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. That little patch of skin there, we focus. Then from there we can expand the awareness just a little further to include the nasal passages. We'll also expand and become aware of the rings of the nostrils. So we've got these three parts of the nose. The little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip, the rings of the nostrils, and the nasal passages. And here we will just focus our awareness completely on the movement of the breath. So we're noticing and aware. When we breathe in, we know we're breathing in. When we breathe out, we know that we are breathing out. When we breathe in a long breath, we notice that. When we breathe in a short breath, we notice that. Try to stay with the breath for its full duration. Staying with the entire in-breath all the way until it slows and pauses and reverses. And then you stay with the out-breath all the way until it slows and reverses, becomes the next in-breath. We just observe over and over, over and over. And now within that triangular area of the nose, open up your awareness to the feeling of touch, anywhere in that triangular area. As the breath moves in and the breath moves out, there is a feeling of touch somewhere as it passes over the skin. So become aware of that feeling of touch. And then as you do, become aware of more subtle sensations within the touch. So you might notice when you're breathing in that the air feels just a little drier. And then you breathe out, the air feels a little more moist. You breathe in, the air feels cooler. You breathe out and the air feels a little warmer. So these are all attributes of the incoming and outgoing breath that we can observe. And just stay with them fully. After a few moments of observing in this way, we'll often come upon distractions. We'll discover at some point that the mind has wandered a bit away from the breath. And maybe it's thinking about a sound that it just heard, or maybe it's thinking of some strong physical sensation it experienced. Anytime you notice that the mind has wandered away from the object of meditation, in this case the breath within the triangular area of the nose, whenever you notice that, just guide the awareness gently back. Just return to the tip of the nose, the movement of the breath, the touch and sensations of the breath. Just stay with it. Stay with the breath. The distractions will begin to just vanish on their own. Sometimes those strong physical sensations will distract us, the pain or the itching. Again, just take notice, return the awareness and refocus on the breath. And if the mind is wandering away on its own, just imagining things or daydreaming, remembering, just let go of that tendency of the mind, refocus awareness on the nose and on the breath. So that's really all we need to do. Each time we become aware of a distraction and we guide the awareness back to the breath, we make our practice stronger. We are developing the strength and the ability to focus the mind on what is true in the present moment. So let's spend just a few minutes together meditating in silence. Let's stay with this practice of observing and releasing these distractions. We'll stay with that practice, redoing that as many times as we need to. And in a few minutes I'll sound the bell to end the meditation practice. Take your time coming out of the meditation. And feel free to stand and stretch or move around however you'd like to. You get comfortable again in your body. And be gentle and compassionate with yourself. And we'll take about a minute break, so if anybody wants tea before we start. And Elaine, are you still thinking that you'll be heading out?
Yeah, because the fog might be heavy.
Sure. Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes we have people that will do that where they'll come do the meditation and, don't stay for the second part. And you can always do the other, the reverse of that too, so perfectly fine. But it's great to have you.
Where do you live?
Somerset.
Oh, okay.
But you had a poem that you had mentioned that you
Yeah.
wanted to share with us, so I'd love to hear it.
Okay. This is kind of for what you had said last week about suffering. And I just came across this yesterday. I'd read it before, but I couldn't put my hand on it, and then I just came across it. And this is anonymous, and it was written at one of the death camps in 1945, and it's kind of it's a poem, but it's kind of a prayer too. O Lord, remember not only the men and women of goodwill, but also those of ill will. But do not remember all the suffering they inflicted on us. Remember the fruits we have bought thanks to this suffering, our comradeship, our loyalty, our humility, our courage, our generosity, the greatness of heart, which has grown out of all of this. And when they come to judgment, let all the fruits which we have borne be their forgiveness.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's strength and courage right there. That's for sure. Thank you for sharing that, Elaine.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. There's a Holocaust survivor named Viktor Frankl, which a lot of people are probably familiar with. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning shortly after being liberated from a concentration camp. And I find just sort of the strength and the wisdom that some of these people were able to cultivate in the face of the horrors that they were experiencing. I just think it's amazing. And Frankl said, there's this gap between stimulus and response. The bad thing happens to us and then we respond to it. There's this gap in there, and we can get into that gap and choose how it is we want to react to these things. And that determines the degree of suffering we have or the degree of growth we experience. So, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing stuff. When I grew up, I went to elementary school in Minneapolis. It was called Kenwood School, kind of over by Lake of the Isles there. And I actually have a recollection of some of my friends' grandmothers who had the tattoos from the concentration camps.
Wow.
Just, kind of an amazing thing. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was
Thank
very,
you.
very beautiful.
Night.
All right.
Right.
See you
Good
next
night.
week, Elaine.
Careful.
Take care.
Okay.
Safe travels home.
They've had some, I don't know, like on Netflix or whatever, I don't know if you've noticed things like lately. Seems like they've had a lot of things on the Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fascinating what those people went through. I mean, there's still countries down where it's happening as well, but unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is kind of beyond our ability to
Mm-hmm.
just sort of fathom that. It's
Yeah,
just,
we're worried about, how much, whatever, coffee costs too much today or something.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah,
holy cow.
yeah, just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, yeah, that's great. So let's see, what I have today is last week we were working on the morning recitations, and so I'd like to finish that up tonight. We have enough time to go through the rest of that and finish it up. Did anyone not have that handout? It's morning recitations. I've got a stack of them, so if you don't have one, or you don't not sure, or if you just want an extra one, I got enough.
I'll
for
take an extra.
Yeah, might as well. Everybody can have one. I do believe I have enough of them there. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, thank you. So, when I look at these morning recitations, I look at really what I'm doing is, for one thing, I'm setting the tone for the day by kind of establishing my view and my intention. So I think about, when I think about view, I'm really thinking about the truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the way out of suffering, and the path leading out of suffering. So that's like one of the first things I think about, the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's probably, you could say in many ways, that's just really the cornerstone of the whole teaching, that everything else kind of comes out of those simple things. So, and maybe they're not so simple, but on many levels they are. So, setting the tone for the day ahead. And then the way I look at it too is, I may have a tone that I'm setting by kind of thinking about these truths and then going about my day with these in mind. But what I'm also doing is establishing a relationship with whatever's going to happen to me during the day. So I'm kind of determining what that relationship's going to be. I've shared the saying, it's not what's happening that's important, it's your relationship to what's happening that's important. Because you could have good things happening, but if you were annoyed or irritated or expected something more or better, those good things might not really be providing you with much happiness. And likewise, there could be difficult things happening, but if your relationship to those difficult things is, well, let me see if I can help others, or use this as an opportunity to cultivate some new compassion, it's really not the thing that's happening, it's our relationship to it. So establishing my relationship, our relationship with the events of the day. Knowing that you will most likely encounter things that are going to be difficult. Somebody's going to say something that's going to make you mad, somebody's going to do something that's going to kind of make you feel slighted, or it's going to hurt your feelings. Just people are going to cut you off in traffic or in the line at the supermarket. There's just little things like that are going to happen. But then what we can do is think about, well, what's my relationship to that? That thing happened, but what's my relationship to it? And that's where all the difference. That's where all the difference is made. So we've been talking about the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. We went through this in some detail, so I just want to reread it and then we'll move past it. The first Noble Truth, and again, the Theravada tradition, which is really what I teach, it holds that insight into the Four Noble Truths is liberating in itself. That if you understand this and you're aware of it, that just that is providing you with some liberation in your life. So the first one, and I'm going to substitute the word suffering with stressful in this. The first noble truth is that life is stressful, that birth is stressful, aging is stressful, illness is stressful, and death is stressful. Union with what is displeasing is stressful. Separation from what is pleasing is stressful. Not to get what one wants is stressful. So, pretty true. It's not a pessimistic look at the world, it's just saying these are true statements about the world around us. What is left unsaid is that in addition to this, there's all sorts of happiness, there's all sorts of love, there's all sorts of positive experiences, and those are great. But because human beings have a negativity bias, we are brought down more by the suffering parts than we are uplifted by the positive parts in many cases. And since the positive things aren't a problem, we don't really need to focus on them in this. Although we do learn ways to make the positive things even more positive. So that's just the first noble truth. There's suffering for everyone who takes birth in this world. There's stressfulness, there's dis-ease and discontent. And the second truth is that there's actually a cause for all that. The noble truth of the origin of this stress or suffering is craving. It's this craving which leads to re-becoming, accompanied by wanting things, desiring more things, seeking satisfaction here and there. That's the craving that leads to the suffering. So if you can imagine yourself in a state where you're just perfectly content with everything that is, just the way it is. You don't want anything. You don't need anything to eat or drink. You're warming up. Everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. So in the absence of wanting, there is this complete contentment and this complete happiness. And so that's what the second one is saying, is that craving is the thing where I want it to be different than it is. Whatever's going on, if I want it to be different than it is, there's a little bit of agitation in me, right? If I'm behind somebody that's going 50 and I want to go 60, a little bit of agitation. If I wanted the promotion at work, somebody else got it, a little bit of anger or a little bit of feeling hurt. Just on and on, all these things, but they're all based on us wanting something to be different than it actually is in the present moment. There's that wanting mind. I want it to be different. And so that's where suffering comes from, right? So suffering is different from pain. You can break your ankle, and that can be very painful. You can go in and get a cast, and your ankle will begin to heal. If now you start to think about all the things that you would have been able to do that you now can't do because you have a broken ankle, and how miserable you're going to be, and how unfair it is that this happened to you, it takes the pain of the broken ankle and it turns it into suffering. So if that makes sense, it's just sort of a subtle thing. It's kind of obvious, but in many ways we just never think about it. So we're seeing where this suffering is coming from, wanting things to be different than they are. So we usually call that craving, clinging, and aversion. So they all sort of talk about the same thing, but craving is wanting something that isn't there. Clinging is wanting to hang on to something that's certainly going to end at some point in time or change. And then aversion is kind of the flip side of craving. I don't want that to happen. I want it to stay away from me. I don't want to deal with this person, this kind of thing. So these are all the causes of suffering that we experience. But then there's the third noble truth, which is that when that craving or that clinging or that aversion stops, the suffering stops. So it's like suddenly there's just this silence. Me no longer wanting something to be different than it is in the present moment, I am left with a feeling of real contentment and satisfaction. And so there's happiness in that. It's just a really good feeling. So there's suffering, there's a cause of suffering, there's an end of suffering. All very positive things. And then there's a path that once we get into it, it leads us step by step down a path that helps us to be free from all this suffering. And that's the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'll just read them briefly and then we'll move on. So the Noble Eightfold Path, leading to the cessation of suffering, is right view. So it's our outlook on the world, it's our understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Then there's right intention, what is going on in our mind with our thoughts, and is that in alignment with letting go of craving and clinging and aversion. The next one is right speech, and then I'll hit these together. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. So these are talking about action in our lives. There's three kinds of action. There's physical action, there's vocal action, and there's mental action. So we need to be aware of those three things. But essentially, if you're acting in a way that's hurting someone else intentionally, you can come to meditation and sit and try and feel better, but as long as you're causing suffering in somebody else, your ability to end your own suffering is going to be very limited. So what it's saying here is that there's a system of ethical behavior or virtue that we need to be aware of. If you want to end your own suffering, don't cause suffering in other people. Sometimes we might talk about that as karma or kama, same term, different spelling. So we're aware of that. Our actions are important. Our words are important. Our thoughts are important because our thoughts precede our words and our actions. So those are the right view, the right intention, and the right speech, and right action and right livelihood. And then we get into what are more aspects of the practice: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So right effort is an awareness that at all times the mind is thinking a variety of things. And so if the mind is thinking something negative, something hateful or hurtful, that we're actually willing to intervene with that and try to steer the mind away from that. So often when we're in a negative mood, we just kind of ruminate on that. We think over and over about the negative thing, and this person did this or said that, or I'm mad about this thing or that thing. So what this is asking us to do is just be mindful of that, and when we notice that that has come up, that we'll take some specific steps to let go of the negativity in the mind. And it's like kind of really simple, but wow, it works, So the first right effort is to be aware of unwholesome states of consciousness that have arisen, and to abandon those unwholesome states of consciousness. The next is to be aware of unwholesome states of consciousness that haven't yet occurred, and to work to prevent them from coming up. So sometimes we know that, well, if I go talk to so-and-so, we're going to have a conversation about this or that, or if I look at the wrong website, I'm going to get mad about politics here, So what this is saying is be aware of when there isn't negativity there, and do your best to keep that going. Avoid that. Then the fourth one is to be aware of positive states of consciousness, the positive things that you've cultivated, and then do what you can to keep those going. So, anything that you're doing that's making you feel compassionate or happy or helpful or loving, being aware of that, it's like, okay, well, let me try and keep that going. Let me try and keep that going. And then the fourth is any wholesome states of consciousness that haven't yet arisen, then you try and cultivate those into existence. So that's what right effort is. It requires us to be aware and to do a little work. But what a profound difference that makes. Then we have right mindfulness. And right mindfulness is to be aware of what are called the four foundations of mindfulness, or satipatthana. And so what that's saying is that for mindfulness to be real mindfulness, like right now, mindfulness is a super popular word. You see it in magazines and articles, especially about health and healing and holistic wellness and those kinds of things. You see a lot of mindfulness. And I think most of those articles are helpful to a degree. They're certainly not harmful, but many of them miss the mark on historically what mindfulness is. So what mindfulness is, it's based on four things. It's an awareness of the physical body. You're aware of the body, what the body is doing, its positions, its movement, its rest, its activity. So you're aware of the body, not in an uptight way or a weird way that makes you feel like you're encumbered by all this, but it's just a general awareness. The next is to be aware of the sensations in the body, which are directly related to what the body's doing. So there are sensations in the body all the time. The thing that we don't often notice is that these sensations are there, but we're not really feeling them. We're not aware of the sensations on the surface level of consciousness, but there's a part of the mind, the unconscious part of the mind is always aware of all of those sensations. And the unconscious part of the mind is always reacting to them. So that brings us to the third foundation of mindfulness, which is awareness of the mind itself. What's your mind doing? Is it thinking? Is it at rest? Is it planning? Is it remembering? You're just sort of aware of the mind and what it's doing in a parallel way to your awareness of the body and what it's doing. My body's active, I'm sitting, I'm moving my arms, I'm talking. So you can be aware of the mind in the same way. My mind's thinking, it's remembering, it's planning, so you're aware of the mind. Or my mind is quiet and stable and calm. And then the fourth is, how does that feel? The mental aspect of it. So really, how do my thoughts and plans and all my ideas and daydreams and those things, how is that feeling? What are the emotions that are coming out as a result of those? So that is the four foundations of mindfulness. And so that's what we're asked to work with. So that's right mindfulness. After that, we get to right concentration. I'm sorry, I was talking about right effort. Right mindfulness, okay. Actually, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. I talked about right effort, which is, the effort to abandon the unwholesome states of consciousness, the effort to prevent unwholesome states of consciousness from arising, the effort to cultivate unarisen positive states of consciousness into being, and the effort to maintain positive states of consciousness that have arisen. So that's right effort, and right mindfulness was those four bases that I just talked about. And then you get to right concentration, which is concentration of the experience of the physical body and the mind in the present moment. So you're focused on what is in the framework of the mind-body complex at all times. that's the type of meditation that's considered right concentration. So that's the first part of those morning recitations. Just kind of reading through that and absorbing that these things are all true, and how having an awareness of that is really going to change our relationship to what we're experiencing during the day. Because we're going to think about all these things differently. You know, if I react in this way, is this the wholesome way to react, or is this going to lead to me feeling bad later? We start to become very aware of it. And oftentimes things change, like maybe we would have lost our temper with someone and maybe hollered at them a little bit, and then later on we'd feel terrible and guilty, and then there'd be this thing between us that we'd have to kind of fix and deal with. So when we start off by kind of refamiliarizing ourselves with this first part, the Four Truths and the Eightfold Path, we're really much more likely to be aware of what's going to cause suffering in our own lives, the lives of others, what's going to lead us down a path to freedom and peace and happiness. So that's that first part, just trying to recap that because it's so important. Any questions on that part at all? Anybody? This is something we talk about fairly regularly, and I try to talk about it from a slightly different angle each time because I think that always helps us get a better overall view of it. The next one is called Taking Refuge. The triple gem, it's sometimes called. And this one is it's just preference. If this is something that resonates for you, you might want to try and do it. If it feels odd to you, then don't do it. It's not a requirement. But it's called Taking Refuge. So, and this is a very popular one. And I'll just read it to you. I take refuge in the Buddha, the awakened one, who through great effort found the path that leads to the end of suffering. I take refuge in the confidence that I too will attain enlightenment in this very lifetime. So that's a taking refuge in the historical person that was the Buddha, what it was that he discovered, this path to the end of suffering. And so it's kind of a reverence to him, but it's not like saying that he's a god or a deity and we're worshiping this person. It's being aware of what it was he discovered and taught, and then taking refuge in that because we know that there's great potential for our own liberation and happiness in it. So that's the first refuge. The second refuge is I take refuge in the Dhamma. The Dhamma is the great body of teachings expounded by the Buddha. I will diligently walk the path of Dhamma without ceasing until I attain enlightenment. And the third, I take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha is the community of Dhamma practitioners. So we are Sangha together. We are all Sangha. And I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of Dhamma practitioners who support me with their compassion, love, and encouragement. Through the merit I create by practicing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. So, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And so my note on this is when we take refuge in the Buddha, or in any way pay homage to the Buddha, we're doing two things. First, we're recognizing and paying respect to the man, Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha, who lived 2,500 years ago, and is the founder of the system known worldwide today as Buddhism. So Buddha is not a name, it's a title, and it means one who is awake. And that came from a little story where he had been, for 7 years, he had been going through extreme asceticism, where he was more or less starving himself. He was sitting out in the elements and just meditating endlessly, being, bitten up by insects and all these other things. He was so focused on, if I sacrifice enough, I'll discover what the truth is. And he was really coming close to death. And at some point in time, there was a young woman who was walking down the path, and he was sitting on the side of the path. And she could see that he was emaciated and just, literally on death's door from starvation. And she had this rice and milk mixture. And she brought this to him and offered it to him. And he realized, yeah, if I stay on this path much longer, I'm not going to be alive. And so I need to do something in order to be able to continue. So he accepted the rice and the milk from the young woman and thanked her, and she went on her way. And so he was replenished physically and mentally, and he started to look better. And then he was able to kind of break through to the final stages of the discoveries that he made for the practice. And after that, he looked radiant. He had finally achieved what it was he had been searching for all these years. And he realized it in such a solid, such a tangible way that he knew he could teach it. And so he was just beaming. And so as people, he was again on the outskirts of a town, kind of right on sort of a main path in and out of there. So as people would come back and forth, they would look at him and they thought, this guy looks like something special, looks like, just something about this person. Now, he had been extremely wealthy for many, many years before he gave up all of his riches and things. And so he still sort of had this countenance or this appearance of like a king or a royal person. And by all accounts was like physically a very strikingly beautiful human being. So anyway, people were walking by and seeing this person, and they started to come to him and said, are you a god? And he'd say no. And are you a ghost? And he'd say no. Or are you some sort of a special divine creature? And he'd say no. And they'd say, well, what are you? And he said, I'm awake. That was his response. I'm awake. And that word Buddha means awake, and that's how that became his title. By telling people, I'm awake. He had discovered what he needed to know in order to end suffering in his life and in the lives of other people. So as we get into these three refuges, again, Buddha not a name, but title, meaning one is awake, one who is awake. Secondly, we're taking refuge and hope and finding solace in the promise of our own liberation from suffering and ultimate Buddhahood of our own. We too can become Buddhas as a result of our practice. So that's the three refuges. So again, sometimes people feel a little, just sort of odd about that. They don't feel like they want to take refuge, and that's fine. None of these are requirements. The first one, though, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, that's kind of base camp for practice, so it's helpful to know that one. Some more that I find are, this is a really beautiful one. This is called Bodhisattva Vows, or the Four Great Vows. And to give you a little context on this, a bodhisattva is a person who's like one step below a Buddha. This is a person who's gone through all the steps and all the practice necessary to become a fully enlightened Buddha being, so they could just go off on their own and just, live in the jungle or their cave and be blissfully happy because they've discovered the secret. But instead of doing that, they decide to forego that ultimate enlightenment and just stay with others so that they can help share what they've learned, and so this is compassion. So the bodhisattva stays with suffering humans to help them. Often the bodhisattva is pictured as Kuan Yin, who I have on the little black table outside underneath the bulletin board. It is a depiction of a woman who carries a bottle, which is a medicine to heal the hearts and minds and bodies of others. So Kuan Yin is often looked at as sort of the embodiment of the Bodhisattva. So it's kind of a neat thing. So the 4 Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. And Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. And so the note I have here is that each of these vows is essentially an aspiration to attain the unattainable. But still you're setting your mind in such a way that that's my goal. I'm going to help people, I'm going to liberate people, I'm going to save the people that need to be saved. I'm going to end my own desires, even though there's just an endless stream of them. I'm going to enter Dharma gates, which means learning the truths taught by the Buddha. I vow to enter them. And the Buddha's way is unsurpassable, so virtually unattainable for most mortals, but I vow to become it. So I've always thought those were beautiful. It's a real statement of compassion. Then we get into a Pali word called nekama. That word means renunciation, and it's something that is helpful on the path. Some people will do these renunciations for a period of time, not unlike the way Lent is observed in our culture, but these are very specific things. So the first one is, I undertake the precept to refrain from destroying living creatures. So the first one is to not kill. I undertake the precept to restrain from destroying living creatures. The second one, I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. So you could think of that on one level as I'm not going to steal stuff that doesn't belong to me. But then on another level, I mean, sometimes we take things that, yeah, people are saying we can take it, but we're kind of pushing for more. We're sort of taking advantage, or we're kind of, pressuring someone. So this is kind of a neat way of looking at it. It's not just stealing, but sometimes it's trying to take more than that person is comfortable giving. And so we might put them in a difficult place. So that's something to think about. The third one is, I undertake the precept to refrain from misusing sexuality. And this one's written in many different ways, but, I think you could just probably take the news stories that we've had for the last 7 days and say, that's a pretty good way to apply this one right here. Misusing sexuality is maybe not necessarily, rape or, a specific violation kind of a thing, but it's also, misusing power, in that power dynamic that's there. Things of that nature. So I look at it that way. Sometimes people ask about, in the practice, they'll say, what does Buddhism say about homosexuality or about being gay? Is that misusing sexuality? And the answer is no, that's not misusing sexuality. If you are gay and in a relationship, and there's an expectation that you're going to be monogamous, and you aren't, then that's misusing sexuality. It's got nothing to do with being gay or straight. Same thing if you're straight. If you're in a relationship and the expectation is monogamy and you violate that, then that's misusing sexuality. So that's really what Buddhism says about that. Love is a good thing. Loving people is a good thing. Committed relationships with people is a good thing. And so being gay and being in love is a good thing. But whatever you do, don't misuse sexuality in ways that will hurt other people. So I think that's kind of neat. And then I undertake the precept to refrain from incorrect, false, and divisive speech. So real simply, we shouldn't lie, because that usually causes more problems than anything else. But also divisive speech. You know, sometimes we might be saying something that isn't necessarily a lie, but we might be kind of trying to whip up some trouble, you know, kind of tell one person one thing, another person another thing. Maybe technically not lies, but the speech is divisive. Or you could watch, again, the news and just watch a couple of politicians talk and say, you know, that's not right speech. Because oftentimes they are saying things that are incorrect or false or divisive, or they're trying to mislead in the way that they're speaking. So this is destructive. You know, we all recognize that, but this is one of the precepts. And then the last one is, I undertake the precept to refrain from intoxicating drinks and drugs which lead to carelessness. And this one doesn't mean you can't have a glass of wine or go have a 6-pack of beer on a weekend when you're watching football and eating pizza. What this is saying is that in order for mindfulness to work, we have to have a mind that's clear. And so, sure, we go out and have a glass of wine or a beer or a few drinks or whatever, and that's okay. But, you know, those are kind of rare circumstances, and so what we're trying to do is face the absolute reality of our own situations with a clear head. And if we're intoxicated, well, we're likely to do or say things that are not rational or not wise. We're more likely to do things that would hurt other people. You know, if you look at most of the murders that occur in this country, I think I've read statistics that say the majority of those, there's some sort of chemical abuse going on at the same time. So obviously there's danger in that. So these are the 5 precepts. You know, again, optional, but probably for most of us, we're already really kind of following these. But then to read them and sort of look at them in the context of how they're describing them is kind of helpful. It sort of brings some meaning to something that we're already doing. The next one is the 5 remembrances. This is from a sutta called the Upajjhatthana Sutta, and the translation of this one is actually by Thich Nhat Hanh. The way these work is that most of these teachings, most of these things that I share, were written initially in either the Pali language or the Sanskrit language. And we're sort of in this like amazing Renaissance period right now, where many of these texts were discovered really within the last 100 years and are now just being translated into English. I mean, there have been some since the early 1800s that have been translated, some real basic ones, but a lot of these are translated like right now, and there's still quite a few that have not yet been translated. So it's really neat to know that this stuff is, even though it's 2,500 years old, a lot of it, we're just hearing it for the first time. So just kind of a neat thing. So anyway, in this case, there's always a translator here that translates some of the Pali, and I've been trying to learn Pali to the degree that I can to help with some translation. But this was translated by Thich Nhat Hanh. And so the 5 remembrances. what these are is a way of just sort of touching base with our own immortality and the impermanence of life and what's important. So the Buddha urged his monks to practice like this each morning. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So, in some ways, these sound like a little bit of a, Debbie Downer kind of a statement. But really what they're saying is, remember, this isn't going to last forever. So how important is it really to win that argument? Or how important is it really to make that next chunk of money? What's the most important thing? Knowing that we're growing old and that we'll have ill health and eventually we're going to pass away. What's important? And so what's important is the people that are dear to us, the people and the creatures that are dear to us. And so that's important. And so by recognizing that this is impermanent, it's fleeting, it's passing, we don't get too excited about the bad stuff. We don't get too bent out of shape about it. And we really take a look at what's important and try to make that important, trying to act on that, how important that is. So those are the 5 remembrances. And I actually find them really comforting, comforting. Because I know I'm growing old. I know things are going to change with me. But my kids are growing old. My son is 30, my daughter's 26. My daughter's moving to Iraq soon, and it's going to be dangerous. And I know there's a chance that, she could lose her life over there. But, so just taking all this stuff into context is really helpful. And so we're doing real good on time, because what I wanted to end with was metta bhavana, which means cultivation of loving kindness. The word metta means loving kindness. The word bhavana means cultivate. And so the practice tells us that we should cultivate loving kindness and that we should do this regularly. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that this has been a real life changer. Because for many years I was in the business world, I was in the corporate world, I was in senior management, I was a chief financial officer for a period of time. And if you're a chief financial officer, it's a pretty good indication that you're a miser and that you're looking for ways to cut pay and benefits for people and increase the bottom line by whatever means are available. And I sort of felt that it was necessary for me to kind of be cold-hearted and distant. And I think that was sort of a self-protection mechanism, because it's like, how can you behave this way towards other people? You can't unless you're doing something to sort of insulate yourself from it. And so I felt that there was sort of a strength and an insulation quality there by acting that way. And when I got into the practice, I was a little resistant to start to do, metta bhavana. I kind of like the other stuff where I can get rid of my own suffering, and I like the way I can, work with all these different teachings. But now you're telling me I have to actually start to feel love, and I wasn't really ready for it. what I experienced in the course of practicing this for a while is that this is just amazingly transformative in a very positive way. So I would like to, since we usually end with our 4 Brahma Viharas, we will end with this in the next couple of minutes. So I'd like to just guide you through this Metta Bhavana cultivation of loving kindness practice. So you can just get comfortable and maybe close your eyes. Again, this is a short one. It's just a few minutes and we'll be done with it. But we're going to start with ourselves. We're going to start by offering loving kindness and compassion to ourselves. And it's important to know that each and every one of us has made mistakes in our lives, right? We've hurt other people. We've done things we regret, and sometimes we feel guilty about that. But we still deserve happiness, We've made these honest mistakes, doing the best we can as human beings, but we still deserve this happiness, okay? So taking this into consideration, I'll just say the words and you can feel them. So really try and feel these as I say them, okay? So this is directed at you, at yourselves. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. May I be free from the causes of suffering. May I be loved and cared for. May I be the recipient of love and kindness. May I be surrounded by love and kindness. May I be happy. May I be blissful. May I be joyful. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be free. May I be equanimous. And you just feel that entering your heart. You feel that. And then the next step of this is to bring to mind the image of someone you love very much. Could be a close friend, a partner, family member, doesn't matter who. Just bring into mind the image of someone you love very much. Imagine that person is sitting in front of you right now. Sitting in a chair the same way you are, just sitting in front of you, looking at you, smiling. And to this person that you love very much, you're offering this to them as a gift. You can really feel it transferring to them, and they feel it as it comes to them. You say to them, may you be well. May you be safe. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from the causes of suffering. May you be loved and cared for. May you be the recipient of love and kindness. May you be surrounded by love and kindness. May you be happy. May you be blissful. May you be joyful. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be free. May you be equanimous. And so this person you love, they look at you and they thank you. Maybe they touch you. They stand and they bow and they leave the room. They've received this gift that you've given them. And now we're just going to bring to mind the image of someone who's kind of neutral in your life. Maybe it's a coworker you don't really know, somebody you see walking around in your neighborhood, walking a dog, just someone who's kind of neutral to you in every way. So imagine this person comes in and sits down in front of you. You just invite them in. Hey, come and sit down here with me. And they sit down in front of you and you can see them in your mind's eye. And you offer them this great gift. You say to them, may you be well. May you be safe. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from the causes of suffering. May you be loved and cared for. May you be the recipient of love and kindness. May you be surrounded by love and kindness. May you be happy. May you be blissful. May you be joyful. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be free. May you be equanimous. And so this neutral person looks at you and they thank you. And there's this connection now that you've wished all these wonderful things to this neutral person. You realize they're no longer a neutral person. They're very much connected to you because their well-being is important to you. And so they stand and thank you and bow and walk away. And now we have someone come into the room that is a difficult person in our lives. Someone who has maybe hurt us or causes us ongoing stress or fear or difficulty in our lives. And this difficult person comes in, and this might be real hard for us to offer these feelings in a sincere way, but we're going to do this to whatever extent is true. So just let whatever is true for you come out as we offer it to this difficult person. And if you can't bring it up, then that's okay. Don't do it. Don't fake it. Just do what you can. So to this difficult person, may you be well. May you be safe. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from the causes of suffering. May you be loved and cared for. May you be the recipient of love and kindness. May you be surrounded by love and kindness. May you be happy. May you be blissful. May you be joyful. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be free. May you be equanimous. So we've offered this difficult person these very compassionate, kind, and loving statements. Again, only offer it to the extent that it's real for you. Sometimes if it's a really challenging person, maybe you start off with, I don't wish you bad luck, or I don't wish something bad happens to you. Maybe that's where you start, but if that's where you are, that's better than nothing. So you start with what you can offer. And now, just to close, we'll kind of open our hearts and minds up to really all the living beings in the universe, in the world around us. The people, the dogs, the cats, the birds, the fish, the insects, every being, every living being, we bring them all to mind. And we just finish with, may you all be well. And they all see us, they all hear us. May you be safe. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from the causes of suffering. May you be loved and cared for. May you be the recipient of love and kindness. May you be surrounded by love and kindness. May you be happy. May you be blissful. May you be joyful. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be free. May you be equanimous. Namaskar, everybody. Thank you so much for coming,
Thank you.
for listening, for participating. I went a little long, I'm sorry. Had to fit it in. So, and I was just going to let everybody know, Cheryl Betcher, she asked me a couple times, I have these malas, these different necklaces and things, these Buddhist malas. She's asked me a couple times, because I make them. She's asked me a couple times to make them available. So starting next week, I will have them. I'll have a variety of different malas. I've got some brand new meditation cushions that I've made. I've also got some actual Tibetan bells, similar to this one, and similar to this one, that I'll be just kind of putting out there for sale for anyone who is interested in this type of thing. So I know that some people kind of want to have their own little sort of sacred space at home to do their practice. So just letting you know, I'll have that stuff starting next week if anybody's interested in it. It'll be kind of fun. But it'll be neat to share these, because this kind of stuff has been really special for me in my practice. I've really appreciated it. So I'm excited to be able to share something beyond just the necklaces and the bracelets, but get into some of these actual sacred artifacts. So thank you.